Sorry. Shavua Tova, good vach. So as the custom is, thank you, Janet, that we teach, before we teach our class in halacha tonight, we do a story or two of tzaddikim or the Baal Shem Tov. So this week is Shabbos Nachmu and Shabbos Parshas Veschanan, Motzaei Shabbos Veschanan. So there's a story about the Shema Yisrael that we read about in Parshas Veschanan, the sixth reading, that there was it's a story of I'll tell it in short, of a person who was very industrial and successful in Spain after the expulsion and after the Jewish people went into sort of hiding, as they're known as the Marranos at the time, people who kept their Yiddishkeit in extreme hiding. So there was this person who was very successful, and he became very close to the king and to government, and he was involved in all things that were important to the country with regard to the finances, and he became a very reliable source of support to the king and the government. And he himself becomes very sick one day, and mamish deathly sick. And so he was a Jewish person that was in hiding, and so he was openly a Christian person. So they brought in the king's confessor because he wanted to try to give him the best treatment he can, and after trying all he can to try to heal him, so he brought his confessor in to confess and to get ready for his going into the afterlife. And miraculously, he has a recovery, and he recovers, and he comes back to slowly gets back his strength and comes back to himself, and everyone's extremely excited. And everyone's joyful of the great miracle, and no one really thought he would recover from this tremendous illness. They brought in all the doctors. So after he started to gain strength and eventually getting back to his full self, he made a meeting with the confessor that took his confession and gave him and prayed for him before he passed away. And he says like this. He says, thank you for being there for me when we thought things were difficult. But I remember very clearly you whispered something in my ear right before, when you thought I was about to pass away. What is it that you whispered? So the priest becomes very nervous and agitated and very frightened. He says, I'm not sure what you're talking about. He goes, no, I know exactly. I'm very clear. I know exactly what this was about. And I think if I'm not mistaken, you were whispering Hebrew words and something to the effect of the Shema Yisrael. And now the priest is becoming really extremely frightened, terrified, because if he's accused of being a Jew, the tortures of the Inquisition were notorious. He himself was part of the system as a priest, and he says, I don't know what you're talking about. And this person keeps on pressing and pressing, and finally he says, listen, I know clearly you said the Shema Yisrael, which is a Jewish prayer that I remember from my youth. But I'm also Jewish, but we have to be faithful to our faith and our new faith. And therefore, I want you to denounce Judaism to me, and I'll forget the story. Tell me that you'll never do it again, and let's, commit to our new Savior, etc., etc. And the person all of a sudden becomes very strong, and he says, absolutely not. If you want to report me, you can report me. I'm ready to die for my beliefs. I am not going to denounce the true Hashem and Torah's Moshe. And I'm not. Do what you want to do. I'm ready to die for Hashem. So when he saw that he was mamish sincere, he says, listen, I'm also Marrano, not just that I come from a Jewish background, but I'm also faithful to my faith. And I've been, for many years, got very lost in my work and government work, and I was getting less and less involved, but I still have my deep feelings for Hashem. And when I was very sick, I had a dream. My grandfather came to me and he said that, listen, you're gonna live, but if you want to live, you have to change your ways. You have to leave Spain and live a life as a Jew. And before you leave, you have to take your father's remains. His father passed away and was buried in Spain with you. So he says, listen, we have to make a plan, both of us, to leave. And this priest was part of the burial committee, so he had the ability to get his father dug up and to get his remains out, as difficult as it was. And they figured out some sort of scheme that they're going to travel to the Holy Land as a thanks for his recovery. And he's going to ask the priest to come along with him, and the king will grant him the wish because he was very close to him. And they made their way to Eretz Yisrael, and they moved to Tzfas, like a lot of those who were who were escapees from Spain or Portugal in times of the Inquisition. And that whole community, the Kabbalistic community, the Beis Yosef, they were all originally from Spain, and they lived a life of righteousness, and they both became great tzaddikim, and living out the rest of their life in Spain. So that's a story about the Shema Yisrael. The second story I wanted to tell before I actually do something a little different this week, before we start the class, which is that there's another story told of the Tzaddik Remeir Parmeshlan. We told a few stories about the Tzaddik Remeir Parmeshlan, who, who passed away around the year 1850. So he lived around the times of between 1780 or so till 1850 or so. So we don't know exactly when he was born. So Remeir Parmeshlan lived in a city where he dealt a lot with the new age of the Enlightenment, and there was a lot of those who were around him and in a city that he had to deal with that were either mocking Yiddishkeit, definitely mocking the Rebbe and the Rebbe's ways. So there was a couple of a person called Reb Shimon, who was he was a person that had dealings of international trade and kind of a lot of smuggling in and out of the border countries. And he had a lot of contacts in the police and the border police. So he made a business in doing the kind of shady things in international trade and import export. And he was a very secular in part of the Enlightenment, very much unaffiliated and with Yiddishkeit openly. And he openly kind of mocked the Rebbe of Parmeshlan. But his wife was a righteous woman who was a Hasidah. She herself was a follower of Remeir Parmeshlan, but her husband was not. And that was not uncommon in those days. It could be that he himself, went to yeshiva and later. So she would always go to the Meir Parmeshlan and ask for brachas, and especially she asked for blessings to have children because they weren't blessed with children. She wanted a son. And the Meir Parmeshlan would always say, I'll daven for you, but he would not give her blessing for a son. Because I guess of the situation of how her husband was. One time, actually, she goes to the Remeir Parmeshlan, and he says to her something different this time. He says, "Listen, I heard that your husband has been talking about me, and it was in a private kind of discussion amongst Gentiles that it was not possible really for a Remeir to have heard it from anywhere in the physical sense, kind of through Ruach HaKodesh with the divine spirit. Your husband's been talking negative about me, and tell him he has to come at once to speak to me about this." And she says, and then through this you'll be saved. You'll have a child. So when she goes back home, and her husband, usually she would go to the Rebbe when her husband was on one of his business or venture trips. So when he comes home, she tells him, the Rebbe wants to see you. You have to go visit him. He starts laughing. I'm not going to the Rebbe. He says, well, the Rebbe knows that you spoke about him, and he became pale. How did the Rebbe know? And you need to go speak to him, or else the consequences. So he didn't know what to do. He was openly against the Rebbe and all these kind of religious ways, so to say. So he didn't, and he had friends and feel that were with him in this mockery of Yiddishkeit and of the Rebbe Parmeshlan. So he was scared to go directly. People would know that he went to the Rebbe. So he went to the city of Lemberg. He told his wife, "We'll go to Lemberg, and from Lemberg we'll go to Parmeshlan. People won't know." When he comes to Parmeshlan, he comes to see the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, "You didn't come directly to me. Don't do detours. You want to come to see me, you have to come directly from your home." So when he saw the Rebbe really knew everything, so he tells his wife, he says, "Listen, I commit to go to the Rebbe. We'll go for Shabbos Nachamu. We'll go to the Rebbe." So comes Shabbos Nachamu, he comes directly to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe welcomes him tremendously, and they spend Shabbos there. And it comes to davening, to the time of the Krias HaTorah, which we're about to learn the laws of Krias HaTorah. The Rebbe says he should get an aliyah. He should get called up to the Torah, and he gets an aliyah. Now, sometimes the custom is when a person gets an aliyah, they make a Misha Berach. Misha Berach, which is what you could donate possibly to the shul or to the organizations or to the Rebbe's funds. So he's about the Gabe calls up and starts making a Misha Berach. He's about to say Bavur Shiyitin, to ask him how much are you going to donate, and the Rebbe cuts in. He says, "Oh no, I'm going to say what he's going to give. Bavur Shiyitin, that he's going to do a favor for a Yisrael." No one knows what that means. The fellow doesn't know what this means, but he hears the Rebbe, so they make the Misha Berach. After Shabbos, he comes to see the Rebbe. The Rebbe says like this: "Listen, I'm going to explain you what this Misha Berach is. There's going to come a time where you can have an opportunity to do a favor for a Jew, a Yisrael. And it's not going to be easy. I'm telling you now, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult. But if you commit to 100% do this favor, that you'll see what it is. You'll know when it comes your way, you're going to know what I'm talking about. If you're ready to do this uncommitted, you commit to this favor, to this tova for yid, a chesed, a yid, a kindness to another Jew, then I promise you, you'll have a son. So he committed, and they had a son. Many years later, it's a famous story. The second part of the story is a famous story. I never knew the beginning of the story till I read the story from Rabbi Yerachmiel Tillis, who tells this story. That he says he's around the city of near the Austrian border with Russia. Then there was the Rebbe of Ruzhin, Rabbi Sroll of Ruzhin, was who was a tzaddik who with his way of serving Hashem was in glamour. He had a huge, outwardly very wealth and gold, and his whole demeanor was very harchava. Like it says, what was gold made for? It's made for the tzaddikim, for the Beis Hamikdash. And so there was those who told on him and told that he should be Hazy. We're telling the story of Rameir Parmeshlan. So there was those who told about the Rebbe of Ruzhin that he was counter-revolutionary. He was a revolutionary, and he was not. He was not. Hey, Rebecca, we're just telling the story of Rameir Parmeshlan before we go to the halachos. So he was telling that the Rebbe of Ruzhin was told. They told him that he was against the Russian government, so they arrested him. He was in jail, and they were scared of the life of the Ruzhin Rebbe. Now, the Ruzhin Rebbe was a big tzaddik. Till today, there's many courts of Chassidim that are descendants of the Holy Ruzhiner. And he was himself a great-grandson of the Holy Maggid the Mizrich, the teacher of the Baal Shem Tov, of the Alter Rebbe, the student and the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. So the Holy Ruzhin Tzaddik was known as a tremendous tzaddik. And so he somewhere or another, he escapes from prison, and the Chassidim where he was hiding felt that the best way was that he had to get out of the Russian Empire, and he had to make his way to Austria. In Austria would be better. But he had to cross the border. And word got out amongst those who know that the Ruzhin was trying to cross the border, to get himself across the border. The news comes to this person, Shimon, as well. Some way or another, he was in the area, and he heard that the Rebbe needs to make his way to across the border to Austria. Now, again, what's the Rebbe's name? The Rebbe's name is Yisrael of Ruzhin. So now he remembers the promise that he made to the Rameir Parmeshlan, and he remembers he has to do a favor. So he came over to the Chassidim where they were meeting. He said, listen, I know the Rebbe needs to make it to Austria. I'm an expert on crossing the border, because again, he was a person that dealt a little bit in shady stuff in taking things across the border, and he knew all the police and he knew all the stops. He says, I could cross, there's a river, the main river, I'll cross him by foot. I will carry the Rebbe across the river to safety. So they agreed, and he remembered that he made his promise, and now he was able to fulfill his promise. But it was very difficult. It wasn't cold enough, so as though the river was frozen, but it was not solid ice. So it was very light. It was a very thin layer of ice, and you had to be very careful how to cross it, because if you walk into a soft spot and break into the ice, you're dead. There's no way you survive falling into the frozen river. So it took hours of very slow, and he was carrying the Rebbe on his shoulders. It's a very famous story, and he's crossing the river very slowly to make it to Austria. Midway, he stops. So the Ruzhin Rebbe says, why'd you stop? He says, Rebbe, listen, because I lived a life of sin. There's no way I have a portion in the world to come. It's not possible. I have a portion in the world to come. But I committed to do this favor to the Rebbe Parmeshlan, and I'm telling you, I'm making a deal with you. Either you promise me a portion of the world to come, I'm not taking another step. Whatever happens, happens. So the Rebbe Parmeshlan, the Ruzhin said, sure, I promise you, sure, a portion of the world to come, just cross the river. So he continues, he crosses the river, and that's the story. And I think, actually, when you think about the story, it's not that the Rebbe Parmeshlan, the Rameir Parmeshlan, needed someone to cross the Ruzhin across the river. That anyone could have done that. There's many ways God could do things. The Rameir Parmeshlan was such a lover of Klal Yisrael. He mamish loved every yid, even this yid who initially made fun of him in public, and mocked the Rebbe. Only after the Rebbe had to threaten him did he come and ask forgiveness. Rameir Pamashlan was only thinking for the good. So he thought, how could he get this person a person in the world to come? So he made it so in heaven that he should be the person that crosses the Rebbe across the border. And when he crosses him across the border, he'll have an opportunity to ask the Rebbe for a portion, the Rishon of the Holy Tzaddik, for a portion of the world to come. So we see that the love that the Rebbeim and the leaders of Klal Yisrael had, like Moshe Rabbeinu, that we learn about in Dvarim for the Jewish people, is limitless and mamish, even for the greatest sinner. All they're trying to think about is how to help them, both materially and spiritually. Okay, before we go to the class in halacha, I would like to bring up something on the Baal Shem Tov that's connected to Motzaei Shabbos of Eschanan. So we don't have the opportunity today to learn have a story of the Baal Shem Tov, but here we have a letter that I have in an old sefer that was written, as we see, from the Baal Shem Tov. When was it written? This letter was written from the Baal Shem Tov on Motzaei Shabbos Kodesh, means Motzaei Shabbos, like tonight. Parshas Veschanan, the year Taf Kuf Yud. So it's Taf Kuf Yud would be 1740, I believe, 1750. So he says like this. Here's a letter that the note that the Baal Shem Tov writes. He writes like this. The Baal Shem Tov writes like this. Hinini roish mecha talmidai. I'm noting down for you my student, Hamuvak, one of my faithful students, Harav Hagoyin Hakodesh, Yaakov Yosef, Nishmasa Yair Biktsara al Nair Koten. This is a letter that the Baal Shem Tov wrote to his famous student Yaakov Yosef, which is known as the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, which is one of the greatest students of the Baal Shem Tov, was the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. So he writes the letter to his student, the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. He writes, Biktsara, I'm writing to you something in short pen, al nair cotton, on a small piece of paper, Bikivan bifdei shetisa isa b'chaleis. So you could be able to, I'm writing on short and a small paper, so you could carry this paper with you at all times. A note from the Baal Shem Tov. And then Baal Shem Tov writes, Kibalti mimoiri v'rabi, I received from my teacher. Who's the teacher of the Baal Shem Tov? When he says Moiriv Rabbi, he's referring to, and we know this from the Toldos Yaakov Yosef himself, he's referring to Achia Shuloni. Achia Shuloni was the prophet that the Rambam says that left Egypt and was later in the times of King Solomon. And tradition is that the Achia Shuloni never died. He lived throughout times. And that he was the teacher, and the Toldos told us this, the teacher of the Baal Shem Tov, who taught him all the secrets of Chassidus, was the Achia Shuloni. So the Baal Shem Tov is writing to his student, the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, things that he've heard from his teacher, Moiriv Rabbi, the Achia Shuloni. What does he write him? Number one, if you have what's called nefilas hamochin, and nefilas hamochin means you're in a bad place mentally, whether it's kind of dark place, but nefilas hamochin means kind of, that literal translation means a falling of the brain. It means you're not in a good mental space. This is a letter that the Baal Shem Tov writes to the Toldos. Loimar, you should say Tamni Api. Tamni Api is a reference to Kapitel Tehillim Kuf Yutes 119. It's Tamni's 8 times, because it's eight. Each letter of the Aleph base is in chapter 119. 8 verses for each letter. So you should say the chapter 119. Yosher v'hafach. Say it from Aleph to Taf. That's the way it goes down. The first eight verses is on the letter Aleph, the second 8 verses is in Beis, etc., until the letter Taf. V'hafach, and say it backwards. Taf, Shin, Reish, Kuf, of the letters, of the 8 letters of the 8 verses per letter of chapter 118. So 119. So either first say chapter 119 in the proper way, and then backwards, meaning say backwards the 8 verses backward, the 8 verses per letter backwards. B'kavana atzumu, with great intention, with great kavana. V'yoyel be'ezus Hashem yisbarach, and this will help you if you get into a funk, into a nefilas hamochin, if you're not in a good mental space. That's number one, he tells him. Number 2, beis v'boiker koydem alimud, every morning before you start learning, lahafrish tzedakah, you should give tzedakah. V'chein also koydem hashena, before you go to sleep, b'layla, at night, acher krishma dafka, after you say the Shema before the bed, you're going to bed, krishma shalmita, you should give tzedakah. It means not tzedakah like before Ma'ariv, but tzedakah after Krishma Dafka specifically. Number 3, if there's going to be a day that you become angry, it's known that the Talmud was a bit of a, it's chas v'sham, God forbid, bal yilmoid oisa yom klal, the dal haven, it's understood. Do not learn on the day you become angry. If you have a day of anger, it's not called, it's like, I'm not going to say the word self-punishment, but on a day that you become angry, a way to deal with it is don't learn that day. You shouldn't be learning on the day you become angry. Number 4, so Moirish Chayra means depression, so that's a little different than Nefilas HaMoichin, which is kind of a bad mental space. Here he says, Moirish Chayra, if you fall into a dark place, God forbid, take if Yasa Mitzvah. The best way to deal with kind of in a bad mood, in a bad emotional space, do a mitzvah. Why? Like it says, the simon, the sign is Yismach Yisrael Ba'osav. Yisrael, the Jewish person, finds simcha when you do something. Be active. And the 5th thing he tells him, Tikunim Yilmad Kol Hashana B'chol Yom, Kol Zeh, you should learn from the Zohar of throughout the year on every day. Kol Zeh Kibalti Mimoiri Rabbi, this is I received these 5 ideas. I've received from my teacher Achi Ashuloni, and the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov tells his student, the Rebbe, the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. He says, "Vani moircha moisrlach." I'm your teacher, and I'm giving these over to you. V'kulam badek u'menusa. They've all been checked. Means the Baal Shem Tov says, I tried them when I fell into these situations, whether it is feeling a Marish Chayra, feeling a Nefilas HaMoichin, to that these 5 ideas are very important. And it signs off Yisrael Baal Shem Tov Mimezebush. That's how you pronounce it in Hebrew. Okay, let's go to the halachos, the laws of, after all this, we have 8 minutes. Let's go to the laws of Krias HaTorah. So we're holding chapter 23, law 10. We're talking about that the precedent goes to the Kohen gets the first aliyah. So what about if the Kohen's holding, the Kohen, who's supposed to get the first aliyah, is in a place where possibly he shouldn't get the aliyah, or brichas Krias Shema, or the blessings of the Shema. Or if the Kohen is holding in the Amidah, in the Shemon Esrei, in the silent prayer. Even if he's the only Kohen, that he would have to be, it's not a time he's supposed to be getting an aliyah, because it's during the Shema, the brichas Krias Shema, or surely the Shemon Esrei. And there's no other Kohen, so maybe you should call him, maybe he should stop what he's doing for the sake of the congregation to take the aliyah. The Kitzur says no. Even if he's the only Kohen in the room, you don't call him up. What about to wait for him until he's finished? No, because it's tircha di tzibura. We don't wait for him. Mishum tircha di tzibura. We know how careful we are to make the community, the congregation wait, especially for a single individual. El Kohen Levi or Yisrael. You should call up a Levi or Yisrael. Again, the concern always is that if people know this person's a Kohen, and you don't call him up, people may think that he's not really a qualified Kohen, that maybe that we're questioning his kahuna. But here he can't get the aliyah because he's holding Shema. So we can't call him an aliyah, and we can't wait. So then we call a Levi or Yisrael in his place. Levi b'mkam Kohen. He says, but in this case, you don't say im ein kan kohen. You don't say that we're giving the Levite or the Yisrael, the aliyah, in the place of a kohen, as if there's no kohen. In the place of the kohen, not because there's no kohen. Ein kan kohen. You just say bim kohen because there's a kohen, but it's just they can't get the aliyah because the kohen is in the middle of Shema or brichas Krias Shema or the Shemon Esrei. Ubediyeved, however, im karohu. What happens if they call him by mistake? The gabbai doesn't know the halacha. So what do you do in such a situation? If he's holding in the Shema, or the blessings before the Shema, meaning from Yotzer or through Avos Olam, is Olam Mevarach Bracha, then he goes up, even if he's holding the Shema because he's been called, and he makes the blessings. He can't read, because the custom is that we read, the person who gets the aliyah reads along with the Baal Korah. He won't read along because he's in a place where he shouldn't interrupt. So he makes the bracha, even though that's itself an interruption, but he shouldn't read. He should just listen. If he could quickly, let's say he's holding in the middle of a blessing, or at the end of Shema. You shouldn't just go up in middle sentence. Quickly try to finish it in a way that's not going to be a tircha de tzibura, and not going to be a hassle for the congregation, to just at least get into a midpoint, to a breaking point. A place that finishes the subject. So let's say if he's holding via hafta, finish until Uvisharecha, or if he's holding Yoitzer Or, finish the blessing of Yoitzer Or before he starts Avos Olam, or Avos Olam before he starts Shema, to just finish whatever the little part that he's holding, because we have a big section from the beginning of the blessings to the end of the Shema. So here, if he's holding a middle, he should quickly try to finish in a way that's not going to be holding up the congregation. And of course, it's not the time to be davening slow at the expense of the congregation. What about if they call him up and he's holding in the silent prayer? Even if they call him lo yale, he should not go up. Why? Because he's holding in Shemona Esrei. And then he can't make an interruption of the Amidah to get called up, even though he's the Kohen and the only Kohen in the room. So too, if he made the bracha Goyal Yisrael, and we know that he now be mafsik from Goyal Yisrael, from Geula to Tefillah, so then also he should not go up and interrupt that with the aliyah of Kohen. And he says, however, what happens if he finished already the Sim Shalom? So he finished the blessings. He's holding what we call, the L'kai Nitzar is called the Tachnun of the Tefillah. So it says then, and he called him up, he's holding the L'kai Nitzar, so then he should go up. Again, we said before that if he's holding in the middle of a subject, he should finish the subject. L'kai Nitzar doesn't take more than a minute to read, so either if he could quickly finish the L'kai Nitzar, he should. But if for whatever reason he can't, he could go up because he already completed the Shemona Esrei. What about if he's holding in the parts of the Tefillah that's before the Brichas of Shema, means between Baruch She'omer and Yishtabach. Let's say he's the only Kohen in the room. And then even initially we called him up because it's better to have a Kohen, to have the first aliyah. He gets that honor, even though he's in the middle of the tefillah. But now he's in the tefillah before the Shemona Esrei, before the Brechas Gishma, means again between Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach, he can take the aliyah. Still, lo yikra makar, he still should not read with the Baal Koyer, just to make the brachas. But what about he's holding him Sukkah de Zimra, and he's not the only kohen in the room? So then in kohen the same thing applies to Levi. We won't call him up, because he's holding in a part of the davening still. He shouldn't be mafsik. He shouldn't interrupt. So he's not the only kohen in the room. Call someone else up, even though if he's the only kohen in the room, he gets that aliyah. Okay, let's learn the footnotes. Footnote number 13. He says when interrupting is prohibited. It means he's holding the Shema in the places that it's prohibited to interrupt. He says if it happened that the kohen was called and he was in mid Krishma or its brachas. In other words, from Baruch Hu through Gal Yisrael. So what is the space? From Baruch Hu to Gal Yisrael, he didn't say Gal Yisrael yet. Because if he said Gal Yisrael already, he can't take the aliyah. We said because once he said Gal Yisrael, you'd be mafsik ben geula letfila. But for between the prayer of redemption, the prayer of the silent Shemona Esrei, which has to go right into each other. But if he is holding in between and you called him up, then we said that he gets the aliyah, he calls up, he reads, but he doesn't. He says the brachas, but he doesn't read along. Okay, number 15 is what are we holding over here? And stops at a place where the subject ends. Okay, he's saying, but if you can, to try to stop at the place where the subject ends, not to go in the middle of what you're holding. So not in the middle of the bracha Yoitzer or Avos Olam or the Shema. Try to find it a place where there's a break. The endings of a particular subject, he says, which is called ben prakim, between the chapters. See the list of chapters that we learned already in halachos 16 in the chapter 16. Okay, number 16. He says, what are we talking about? What happens if you get called up and you're holding the L'kai Nitzar? Means you finished the silent Shemona Esrei, but you haven't finished the L'kai Nitzar and done the Osei Shalom. The prayer said after completing the Shemona Esrei, before taking 3 steps backwards. So he says you could go up again, but we already said that if you could finish the subject, you finish the subject. L'kai Nitzar does not take a long time to say, especially if you're in a rush and you have to consider others. So I'm assuming that if you could quickly finish it off in the Osei Shalom in a fast manner, that would be okay. All right, 17. Psukkah de Zimra, he says you shouldn't get called up initially unless you're the only kohen. The chapter is said between Baruch Shamra and Ishtabach is called the Psuki de Zimra. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Shavua Tov. I know we didn't get that much time to learn. We learned other things and stories, but it's good. Let's keep it to the short class that we've agreed to. And Laila Tov, thank you all for joining. Rebecca, thank you for coming, although you had a Shabbaton. Take care, everyone. Shavua Tov.
Thank you.